just don't understand can be very easily answered. And if you don't ask it, you might not ever find out. And I want to say the open discussion as well. Like, I've been doing this just for 6 years, but if there's anything that you've found success with, I think the more knowledge, the better. So if you have anything that you want to say, but it's not necessarily a question, just feel free to do so at one of the question sections. Cool. So with optimizing your CV, just to make sure that it's getting the right point across, I would say the first thing to say is, what is the project that you worked on and what did it do? And not just what did the project do, but what was your specific contribution to that project? And then what did that achieve? So an example of this would be, I worked at this company on this project, which aimed to do this. I personally contributed to this part of the project, and that meant that overall the company was able to save money or do this new implementation or anything else that that project actually achieved for the business that it was within. And then go into like, what skills did you personally use on that project? And you can always follow up with, what skills were you around and what were you exposed to? So if you personally were working on the front end team, coding with JavaScript, and you were able to work with the framework React, but also you worked alongside the DevOps team or the backend team and were exposed to Node.js, I think it's quite important to separate the two, because the skills that you used personally versus the skills that you were around have two different value to the hiring manager reading the CV. And one tip I always give that not a lot of people do is just having a small recommendation from either a colleague or a manager who worked alongside you. So this just gives an added level of trust to basically someone not making their entire CV up. So if someone has publicly said something either on your LinkedIn or has been like, I'm happy for you to use this on your CV as a little quote, it always adds a lot of value to the CV. And if you either have never done a tech job before, but you've been working with a coding academy or anything like that and have public coding examples, it's really important to add them to your CV. So again, it's not just what you've written, but also proof from yourself, or again, from the recommendation point of view from another person, that you can actually do the job. And so this could be like a GitHub or a link to a website, or if you're on the more creative side, maybe a link to a portfolio. And communities like this are a really good example as well. I think it was mentioned earlier that it's really good to have for your profile and for your CV. But having involvement in a community shows that you're interested in what you're doing and that you not just do it as a day job, but you're passionate and willing to learn. And all these types of things really come across well from a CV perspective. And people always ask me, like, should I put hobbies on my CV or should I not? But I've seen people get jobs just because a hiring manager who really likes, I mean, this one was like wakeboarding, but I don't even know what that is. But because the hiring manager wakeboarded and the candidate had it on their CV, they interviewed them because they wanted to talk about wakeboarding, and it ended up being they were a very good fit for the role. So always put a little bit of yourself in there, because people, again, like to connect with people. And that's why if someone can connect to the hobbies that you have, they might be more willing to have a conversation with you and then see the value in what you're doing on the tech perspective, as well as the speaking about wakeboarding or whatever it is you're interested in. And then just training in any certifications. And if you've not gone through any like formal training, even LinkedIn has ones on their like training section. Anything like that can just show that you're, again, active and wanting to learn more, which means then when you're in a role, you might be more willing to put effort into the role and improving day to day. So some common questions that I have about CVs is here. I couldn't figure out how to get them to come out one by one. And the first one is always like, how long should the CV be? And you see these things flying around a lot, like your CV should never be more than 1 page or 2 pages. I just think as long as it gets the point across, it doesn't really matter. But as a common rule of thumb, I would say 2 to 3 pages. And if you're getting any longer than that, just have a think about where you can shorten it. Like, could you go through the last 1 or 2 roles in a lot of detail, and then just less detail in the next ones that come up. And if your pages of skills is maybe 2 pages long, could we shorten that, or look at a way to organize it with bullet points, or by grouping the different types of skills to make it less long? And if you're a career switcher, people ask me, like, should I include that previous career history? And I think it's really relevant to show what skills are transferable, and to also show that you've had and built a career in the past in a different section. So absolutely, definitely include your previous career history, especially if you're going for your first tech role. One I see on LinkedIn a lot is PDF or Word, and it doesn't really matter, to be honest with you. The reason why there's a debate is some people don't want to have a Word document so people can edit it without their permission, but just speak with your either recruiter or the person that you're submitting the CV to, if it was an internal recruiter or a hiring manager, and just ask them what they would prefer, and have 2 copies of each, like have a copy of each, so that you can just quickly work between the 2. I think to connect it to the question where it's, should I edit the CV based on the job description? Having a Word version of your CV is more useful if you are able to tweak it to match the specific role that you're applying to. And do I need a cover letter is quite an interesting one, because sometimes it's required and sometimes it's not. And although a role says that you don't need a cover letter, I think it's always worth following up on an email to the person who has posted the job, just with what you would put in a cover letter. So just overlying or outlining what you think in your CV means that you are a good fit for that role. But if it does require a cover letter, obviously do one. Photos. So as a recruiter, I see a lot of photos on CVs, and there's no right or wrong, really. However, I do know that a lot of companies nowadays aren't accepting CVs with photos because it can show a bias, which means if your photos on the CV, some people aren't even allowed to have names or age or date of birth on CVs, just so that it shows a fair process. So as the world hopefully gets better and better with being inclusive, it means that having a photo on your CV probably isn't a good idea nowadays, whereas maybe 6 years ago it was quite normal. So yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen just so I can see, but does anyone have any questions on the CV part of it, or have anything that you'd like to add?
So there is one question from Ken in our chat. So he's wondering, do you always read every cover letter?
I'll be honest, I don't. I actually don't even look at the cover letters on the applications that come through to me, which is really bad. But from a recruiter's perspective, if I have a role live, I get sometimes over 400, 500 applications.
Mm-hmm.
So to open up 2 different documents and read through it is very time consuming, especially because we don't have any AI tools that go screen profiles or anything like that. It's all me going through it. But what I do say in a lot of my job adverts, or when I send an email out saying we're hiring for this, I say, if you think you're a good fit for the position, apply, and also follow up via email with what makes you connect to this role. And that way I get to read that without it having to be every single person who has a cover letter.
Well, thank you for your honesty.
I don't know if that's the right answer, but yeah.
Yeah, no, but thank you so much. So I guess, this obviously begs the question of, well, what's the point of, doing a cover letters then? Because sometimes when you apply for jobs, you indeed see that it's mandatory, right?
Yeah.
So let's say if we don't put as much effort into cover letters, assuming that most probably they're not getting read, is this something that can work against us, or what's your take on this?
In terms of if there's not a cover letter, how do we get noticed?
Well, yeah, because obviously, the requirement usually is CV and a cover letter. And if cover letters are not reviewed all the time, what's the point of us wasting our time, so to speak,
No,
with these letters? Or would you say that it's still good for us to put a lot of effort in those, just in case if, let's say, some recruiter does review them?
yeah, I would say it might be different because I'm from an agency perspective rather than internal. Internal recruiters may read them, so I wouldn't say hard and fast rule, but from an agency perspective, I don't read them, at least. But I would say if there is a requirement for a cover letter, it doesn't need to be War and Peace. It's just matching your specific skills with what that job description says. And I think someone asked, how long should that email be? Or we can attribute that to how long can the cover letter be? Like 2 paragraphs, maybe 3 at most, where it's just saying, I'm applying to this position because my experience at X company on X project matches very well. And then the middle paragraph, go into more detail about that. The last one saying maybe more about why you want to work for that company or what it means to you, or, where there might be some more personal connection, and then end it there. And I guess the more you write them, the more used to it you get, and hopefully you can maybe connect some other roles and they're quite similar and repeat that process. But I wouldn't say put loads of time into it, because at the end of the day, your experience is what speaks for itself versus the cover letter.
Excellent. And I know you mentioned that it should be 2-3 pages, so to speak, but Anita is asking specifically on words. So how many words should the CV be? She's just wondering what's the approximate number.
Gosh, I have no idea. I think readable. So if it's 2 to 3 pages of like blocks of text, probably not best. But what I look at when I see a CV is like the contact details at the top, maybe a short paragraph about whole career experience, and then breaking down each of your skills by group. So whether it's like cloud skills or development skills or testing skills, and very clearly the role, the dates, what your job title was of that role, and then maybe 2 to 3 sentences about like what the project was, and then 2 to 3 about what you did, and then the skills again. So not lots of words, I can say.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So then when it comes to aligning CV with a job description, so I guess the first question is, what's your take on that? So how thorough we should be with aligning that? Is it better for us to have sort of generic one, or align CV to each of the jobs? Maybe some tips around it to make sure that we're succeeding in that.
Yeah, I think so. When you're working with an agency recruiter, like a good one at least, they'll know not just what the job description is online, but they'll also know what the top 3 things are that client needs to have. And so hopefully their adverts will reflect those top 3 versus, some hiring managers will put, I want, and then they'll list like a million different things, but actually the project is just 3. So the top, I guess, 3 lines of the responsibilities or skills required, I would say that's where you align your CV to. So if you have done it, just making sure that the last 1 or 2 projects on your CV can very much clearly relate to, if it was a .NET developer role with a front end like exposure, I would just highlight your .NET experience in your last role versus trying to push your testing experience that you also did in that role.
So speaking about the project, so Robin is wondering that as a candidate becomes more senior and advance their careers, how important from your perspective are personal projects in addition to work experience?
So I like a personal project on the CV. I think it shows that you are passionate about it outside of work as well, or you are constantly improving your skills and using it in the setting that you're not just forced to be doing it. So I say it's important, but what I would say is having it in almost a separate section to your experience. I've heard a hiring manager say once that they felt deceived by their personal project because they thought that was a real project. And I don't know if I agree with that, but that's just the perspective I've heard from not just that one, but multiple, is separate it from your work experience and then personal.
No, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. I think it's always good to show extracurricular, right? So I don't think there's really, right time for that in terms of when your career is. It just shows more about your enthusiasm and your sort of extra availability, right? And there's time for everything during career, right? Because sometimes we prioritize out other things over extra projects. So I'm going to ask another last question because I'm conscious of time. You still have so much to tell us, but the questions are just flowing. It's amazing. But there is one question which I think is quite interesting these days, and I've had discussions with many friends and colleagues on that. So what's your take on professional breaks on CV, especially for those that are over 1 year? Because I mean, from my personal experience, I know this used to be almost like a bad thing, if you have a career gap, and from my, I guess, experience, this is not really the case anymore. And when I interview, let's say, people, I don't particularly pay too much attention. I might ask for clarification, but it's sort of became more acceptable these days. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it's been definitely more acceptable these days. I think a whole mix of things goes into that. Like COVID, for example, has been a massive thing within why people had a break, because they were made redundant. And then speaking of redundancies, there's been quite a few, and it's been a very challenging market to find a job in, which I don't think anyone can deny. So I think as long as you, in that professional break section, just explain, was made redundant, upskilled in these areas, looking for a role, that's, you can absolutely put it on your CV and explain it. You don't have to be too personal if you don't want to be. I know a few candidates in my network, they've had very personal reasons why they're not in a role for an extended period of time, but it's just then being open and honest when you're at interview stage as to why that was. And you might need to provide a couple more references or something like that for your previous work, just to bring yourself up to the level of people who maybe didn't have a break. But I think as time goes by, people care less and less.
No, that makes perfect sense. So Katelin, please carry on with your presentation, and we will pick up on the rest of questions as we go. I just want to ensure that you have enough time.
Of course.
Thank you.
So we're at the beginning. Let's go fast. So personal branding is something that I've just enjoyed doing, but not passionate about per se, but I've seen the benefits of it, not just for myself, for other people. So I was going to do a quick question, but I'll just give you the answer, is how many people log on to LinkedIn each day? I Googled it, and the answer was 134 million. Well, it was 134.5 million, but I couldn't find a picture for that, which I think is an impressive amount of people. But what does that actually mean? It means that if you have a post and it goes out and you get some good responses on it, like that means that 54,000 people might see your post. And if you're in a job hunt, that's like, if just one of those people were hiring and they clicked on your profile and read about you, it could be the difference of having a job or not. And so just to put in perspective, last year I had over 92,000 people just see a post that I put up. So how did I do that? And I've tried to make it very specific to not a recruiter's perspective, but someone who is in tech. There's a thing called a headline on LinkedIn, and a lot of people just put it as like a software engineer. And if you just put that, the headline is what people see when they want to click on your profile. So I always put like a bit more in there, like, what is it that you are passionate about? What other things are about you in your career? So what do you do, for example? Or what's your current situation? Are you a recent graduate? Are you a career changer? And just adding a bit more about what you're seeking as well. Like, are you seeking a job right now? Are you looking to just make connections in the industry? Let people know what that is. And when it comes to the About Me section or the summary section, I can't remember what it's called, make it a tiny bit engaging. Like, emojis are sometimes a bit cringy to use, but they're also really helpful. And on the back end of LinkedIn, we have a thing called LinkedIn Recruiter. And often we search by keyword. So just put your keywords in there. If you're a Python developer with SQL and like APIs and products, and just use all the words possible to make sure your profile at least gets seen. And the same thing for this person. It's a different about me. It's just put your skills, what you're working on, what you're proud of. And then she's also put here like things about herself, which, like I said earlier, if people can connect with you, they might be more interested in speaking with you. I've got this like 135 trick that I use, which is have like one planning session a week if you have time, and just plan what you're going to do that week with getting your name out there. Try to do 3 posts a week, and then do 5 outreach sessions a week, which might sound like it's a lot of work, but I've tried to break it down as easy as possible. So in that 20 minutes of outreach, try to do 20 connections. So just connect with 20 people in the area that you want to work in. Try to like 10 posts in that area, and do 5 messages as well. So 5 messages out saying, hi, this is who I am and this is what I do. There's 3 types of post, and that's correlates to the 3 posts a week, which is personal. So put something personal about yourself. I think I've said it a few times now, that people like to connect with people, and that's how a lot of people get jobs. And so just put a post up about yourself. It can be work related, it cannot be work related, but just put something about yourself out into the world, because you never know what might come back. And then add some value as well. So add some value into the area in which either you're looking to get into or that you're currently working in. And the last one's credible, and it's the hardest one I find, but it's just putting something out there that lets people see that you know what you're talking about, or you're involved in the communities that you're a part of. Or recommendations is a big one for me, but if you get a recommendation on LinkedIn, just post about it. You never know who might see it. And then if you're really looking to get more impressions and more likes, you can do some like ticks, like you can make some like questions if people can answer them, humor, or maybe something controversial if you wanted some of the LinkedIn warriors to come onto your post. I don't like doing that, so I avoid that. But yeah, so this was a software developer that I knew, and he posted up about being in Bristol and wanted to get involved in tech meetups. And he only had like 100 connections, but he got 5 comments and 13 likes, which was really good. And then this is one of my posts. It was so stupid, but I got like 50,000 impressions on the fact that I couldn't get rid of my sofa. Yes, that was a very, very quick run through, and I can share the slides later, but was there any questions on like how to get your name out on LinkedIn?
We have all sorts of questions. But the one that actually I really like, and I'm intrigued myself, is from Anita. So she's wondering, so, you know, as you're applying for the jobs, you register with all the possible recruitment firms and online and all sorts. So she's wondering, is it actually advisable to leave your CV on all of these websites? And I guess, you know, it's a good question even from data privacy and data protection perspective, because sometimes, you know, you sort of register somewhere and then your CV is used all sorts of different kind of ways, or sometimes unexpected ways even.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that? How should we go about it? Maybe some precaution or advice in terms of how we should engage? Because I think, you know, it can be tricky, you know, when you're really, you know, on it and you really want to find the job, right? You can pretty much go all sorts of lengths, but what is that we should keep in mind?
Yeah, it's a hard one, because I mean, from an inside perspective, if I'm looking for someone for a role and I don't know anyone for it, one of the first places I go is our tool. It's called SourceBreaker. And what that does, it's all the job boards that we are signed up to not just post ads, but see CVs of people who are signed up to the website. And so I can just type in like a few sets of skills, and then all the CVs that have that will come up. But some people forget that there's CVs on there. So there'll be CVs there from like 5 years ago. And I'll call someone and they'll be like, well, how do you get my number? It's like, well, it's on CW Jobs. They're like, I haven't used that in 8 years. It's like, well, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to, like, we've not held your data by any means. It's on this public website. So it's quite scary, isn't it? It's just out there. But it is a way that people find your CV to call you and speak to you about a job that you might be a great fit for. It's also a way that people could just get your CV without speaking to you. So, like my company would never take someone's CV and just send it without their permission, but I have heard stories of that happening, and that is how they would find the CV in the first place. So I don't know what my advice is, because I found people for jobs through that route, but I also understand how it's scary that your information's out there to like a million 18-year-olds who are in their first role. So it's not like there's no right answer really. It's just what you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, I guess it's indeed what you're comfortable with. But I guess from my perspective, what I found, the more I deal through my career with like reputable companies, the safer I feel. So I guess it's always, important to pay attention to those things too. It's about the quality of the jobs as well, right? So it's
exactly.
one of those things. So there is another excellent question from Tour in terms of applying for the same company multiple times. So again, I feel like it's something that in the past used to be sort of, okay, apply every 5 years, for the same company. But I know some people who applied 5 times to one company and then on the 6th time they got the job. So what's your take on that? Does it look okay if we apply for one position, then in a couple of months for another? And if these positions differ a bit, does it sort of demonstrate our perseverance, or it sort of demonstrates that we can apply for anything? So what's your take on that?
I think as long as it's relevant to you, keep applying. If you are just starting out and it's a manager role, maybe don't apply for that. If you're in software and it's testing, but maybe you've gone through a testing course and you want to explain that, I think as long as you can justify the application, it's absolutely fine to keep applying.
Excellent. So I feel like your answer was made Turgu very happy. So that's
good.
Good. Okay. Thank you. That's great. Love it. So then when it comes to you using LinkedIn, right? So this obviously these days is one of the major platforms for us to engage, to stay aware, to show ourselves, build our brand. So Jillian is asking about LinkedIn Premium, and she said that she used it for a while, but she didn't seem to essentially benefit from it as much. So do you think it's worth it when it comes to job search? And maybe there are some valuable features or some tips in terms of how it can be used to help with the process?
I wouldn't see the value in someone who is paying for it from a candidate perspective, to be honest. I know you can probably message more people or without being connected with them maybe, or you can see who's viewed your profile, but I wouldn't say, I don't know how much it costs, but I wouldn't, from my perspective, I wouldn't say it was very worth it at all. I don't know, that's sorry, LinkedIn, and we pay for a lot of LinkedIn Recruiter products, but from a candidate perspective, unless you're really able to afford it, I wouldn't suggest it. You can do what you need to do with the regular LinkedIn.
Yeah, so it really depends on your purpose, I guess.
Yeah.
Excellent. Rashidat is asking quite common question, I think, that we get here in women coding community. So what do you specifically look for in a person without a technical background and, let's say, not as much experience? So she or he, apologies, is reading that employees are more interested in experience as it compares to the real world projects. So what's your take on that? Because indeed, in our community, we have all sorts. We have people with, incredible amount of technical experience, not as much as business, and then vice versa. So what sort of is the good average?
I'd say the most important thing is willingness to learn and being able to demonstrate that you're able to take on feedback. Anything other than that, unless it's a very technical job that you're going for that needs you to start right away being perfect, just making sure that you're able to demonstrate that you're able to take on feedback well, listen, and then action that and improve. That's what most managers look for.
Absolutely. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So there's still some questions, but I'll leave them for a little bit later, and I will pass it on again to you.
Sounds good. I just heard a knock at your door. I'm just going to go tell a person really quickly if I can, but I'll be right back. I'm so sorry.
No worries, no worries. Okay, well, you still have time to post more questions, and thank you so much. This is one of the most, I think, engaging sessions, and I'm really happy to see that your answers are getting answered. But again, if you have any afterthoughts or any other questions, you can always post them on Slack later to us, and we will make sure to bring them to Katelin for further insights. So feel free.
I just ran so fast. Cool, okay. And the last questions, I think some of them actually relate to what's next in the...
Okay, brilliant.
Hopefully. If not, yeah, I'm always happy to answer them later on. Oh no, we're at the beginning again. I should have done it from the current slide. So the next part's all about like how to actually work with recruiters and introduce yourself. And I thought this quote was nice. It was like, finding your dream job can be a full-time job, but luckily it's actually our job to find you that. I just thought that was nice. So you hear a lot of like, oh, don't work with that company, or well, I would never work with that company, that recruitment company. But just keep in mind, like, the company doesn't actually matter. It's just the person working there that does. So if you find someone that you get on well with as a recruiter, it doesn't matter where they work and if it's a good or bad company, just that recruiter is the one that matters. But there are obviously better ones out there, or people with more experience who are more equipped to help you. So some things you should look for when you're looking for a recruiter is, do they have like recommendations or references on their LinkedIn profile or in other public settings? Maybe have they been recommended to you by someone else? Do they repost the same job over and over without changing it month in, month out? That might mean that they're just trying to get CVs in and not actually working on any live jobs. And then, do they actively post? So all the stuff we talked about earlier about the personal and the credible, you can look for that and now on people's profiles and be like, are they actually trying to add value, and are they posting about some of their achievements, and are they engaged with the community they recruit for? And I've been finding this actually trying to reach out to other recruiters for candidates of mine that I'm not able to help. How do you actually get them to respond to you? Because as a recruiter who's trying to give them a candidate who's quite specific, even I sometimes can't get a response. So a couple of things I always look for is, do you have any mutual connections? You can just say, hi, I saw you're connected with John. I know John. Let's connect. That might help a little bit in getting a response. If you have relevant experience, do something they've just posted. Mention that in either the connection or the email that you send to them. I think the big one is just trying to go face-to-face if you can. So do they host any events in the area that you are trying to either work in or get a new job in? So, sorry, my dog's trying to get in. Going to events and just introducing yourself and saying, I'm interested in getting to know you a bit more and potentially working with you as a candidate. And like, how can you create a relationship from the start, and so that you can keep in contact with them? A lot of people do phone calls, but maybe suggest a Teams call or even going for a coffee if they're local. And when you're on that call, try to book in the next call as well, so that both yourself and them are very clear on what the next steps are. And again, I can't say it enough, but events. So maybe mention one that you're going to if they might be interested in it, or if they're hosting one in the next few months, see if you can go along. A lot of them are free and you can just sign up like you've done for this one. So just try to meet them in person. And then what if they don't respond to you? And what if you've had a call, but then they're not responding? Like, should I be annoying? Should I pester them all the time? Or should I just never contact them again? I'd say, like, pop them a message on LinkedIn, email them and just say, hi, we spoke a couple of weeks ago, just wondering if there was any updates. And say the main thing is arrange a time with them and try to be friendly, even though I know it's really frustrating. We're only human. And so when we're speaking to, gosh, I probably speak to about like 15, 20 people a day. And I try my best to organize, but I have ADHD and sometimes I do, just someone slips through the cracks. And I always feel really bad when they message me, but if they didn't message me, I might forget. So don't be afraid to follow up, but just be patient with us if we're trying. And I think it comes down to what most relationships are about, which is trying to be mutually beneficial. So I say, like, if I ever had I'm going to get this dog really quick because he keeps doing it. If I had a friend who just messaged me every 3 months because they wanted me to buy them dinner, eventually that would get quite tiring. And so if I have a candidate and they share some information with me that they found, they'll be the first person that I send a job to if I'm not working with them. And then, like, could that recruiter open doors for you at maybe a company that they work with? Or is there a friend that you have that maybe they're looking for a recruiter that if you respect someone, you might introduce them? And another thing is, if you're looking for a job, just be open and honest with what your expectations really are. And if you're just maybe considering looking for a job and you want to make sure, you just want to find out what's out there, like, just be honest with the recruiter about that. We're always open to, like, exploratory conversations, but if we, just get you interviews and then get through the process and then you turn around and just say, actually, I don't really know if I want to leave anymore, that's absolutely fine. But if you've been so insistent from the start that you want to leave, sometimes it makes it hard for then that person to work with you again. And I think the whole goal of having a recruiter relationship is working with them again in like a 2 to 3 year time. And just being transparent as well with not just like what other interviews you have going on, but transparent with how you're feeling and, what your motivations are for wanting a new job. Referrals are always quite nice if, like, they can refer other recruiters to you, or maybe you can refer other people looking for a job to them. That always helps build more trust or more of a positive. Please don't do this. The last thing is treat them like a human. So we're still people too. So the people that I remember more is the people that remember that I was going camping on the weekend and call me and ask how it was. And it's the same for them. Like, maybe if you have a hobby, just be like, oh yeah, by the way, this weekend I'm going hiking in the 3 peaks or something like that. And being able to share personal details, it doesn't have to be super personal, but just enough, it builds like a friendship does. And this is just an example I had of this is a candidate I've worked with for a while. He got offered a permanent role and he was going to recommend me to find them someone instead. It didn't work, but now this is someone that I do genuinely remember as, oh, the next time I have a job that I'm not working, I'll definitely send it to him because he tried to help me. And then this is like on the opposite side. So I couldn't help this engineering manager, but I really wanted to make sure that he found a role. And so I connected with another recruiter who did JavaScript and just said, hi, like, Jordan, Chris is a really good candidate. Can you help him? I think just having those mutually beneficial ways of communicating really helps build quite a long-term relationship with someone who will be able to help you long-term. So yeah, just overall from everything we talked about, the CV is your way to demonstrate what you have personally done. And then your personal branding is the key to standing out and getting your profile noticed. And then working with the recruiters, just like any other relationship. So just be patient with us, and we're trying and build a relationship. It won't happen overnight, but if you keep in touch and they keep in touch with you, hopefully they'll be able to find you a role one day. I'm sorry for my dog.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think that human element that you emphasized is indeed super important. It's pretty much like building friendship, right? And when it comes to networking, right, it's about, adding value, right? So it's about, even though you're not a colleague or you're not someone who work with, right? But it's about, showing that, we care about you and we can add some value as well. Because, for example, me myself, I have a recruiter that I've been, I think, sort of friends for over, I think, 5, close to 7 years. And, once he got me a job, but there were also some times when I brought him some really good candidates, so, and I helped someone else as a result. So, you never really know what might happen. You really don't know, even though at some point or at this current moment you feel like, oh, this doesn't really, get me anywhere. You don't really know what might happen in the next couple of years or for your close friend, right? So it's just kind of a matter keeping that sort of strategic look and vision. So I think I would definitely advise that. And if something didn't work out immediately, just not to despair.
Yeah.
A sort of. All right. Well, indeed, we have some questions. So Omkar is asking a very good question, in my opinion, something that I sometimes wonder about as well. So job referrals. So how effective are those job referrals? Because I personally sometimes keep hearing that, unless you're referred, you're not going to get a job, So it's almost like helps to get through some initial hooks. And so what's your view on that?
So is that being referred into a job, or?
Correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would say they're probably very effective. So from the inside perspective, when working a role with a client, one of the first things I'll do is, if someone I've placed before has worked there before, that's probably the first person I'll go to. Like being referred into a company by someone that they've worked alongside before, whether or not it's the same company that they've worked for, but a person, that element of trust is there. It's not to say that every job you won't get it because there's going to be a referral, but I do think, going back to the people and the trust element of it, if someone has seen them do well in a role before, they'll probably be more likely to go with that person. But then I guess that's where the other things come in, where it's, do you have a good, trustworthy branding on LinkedIn, or do you have recommendations on your CV? Because it doesn't just have to be someone referring you for that job, but more broadly, has someone else in the world been like, this person can do this job, whether or not it's, I don't know, like parasocial or in real life.
No, that makes perfect sense. And this brings me to a question that's personally for me. So with the, increased use of all the possible AI tools, and we know that AI tools are extensively used when it comes to recruitment and candidate selection. What's your take on that? Because I think what I do hear a lot as well, something like, oh, AI bot just sort of declined and send me this automated response. And, we often feel that, when we apply for jobs and that happens, it's almost like we were not giving a chance, because some AI tools are more advanced than others as well, right? In that. So unless, let's say, you pick up on some particular buzzwords or, for the job, you might not even have a chance, and you may be an excellent candidate, and that happens. So what's sort of your take on that? How do you think we should approach this? If we feel that, or if we happen to know that we actually were not selected because of some of the AI tools, any advice? Well, not how to go around it, but how can we be more successful, let's say, with all these new technologies coming in?
I'm the worst person to ask because I hate it. I hate any AI tool, whether or not it's to do with recruitment or not. But I personally can't answer how to get around it or anything like that, because we don't use anything like that in our, like I said earlier, like if we have a job advert up, like a human is personally going through all 400 applications to find the right person. And that's mainly because we feel like, exactly what you're saying, it's not right 100% of the time. And I think working with an agency recruiter probably means that you'll be getting around the AI tools, because more often than not, we're not using them, because our job is to go beyond what normal companies have, which is building a strong and trusted network of people that we know as people, not as CVs. And that's how I view it anyway. So, but I mean, I guess the quick answer is put as many skills as you can in the skills, but just make sure that when you're doing your project information, you talk about what you've used versus what you were exposed to, like I said in the beginning. But yeah, I hate it. I think it's stupid. I hate the AI tools. I'm so sorry for anyone looking for a job right now that has to go around them or try to think about them.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've heard being particularly tricky for candidates.
So always message people on LinkedIn as well. So once you've applied, message the recruiter, message the hiring manager and say, hi, just wanted to connect to follow up on my application for X. I'm not sure if you had a chance to read it yet, but this is why I think of it.
Yeah. So this happened to me many years ago, I think, when I was pretty much in my 20s. And I had that situation when I applied for the job and I got a rejection. I'm not joking, within 3 minutes. And I was like, no way, this was reviewed by a human, you know. So what I did, I remember I did reach out to a recruiter. It was internal recruiter in that company. And I was just pretty much, you know, explaining situation. And then they were like, oh, we didn't know that happened, you know, and we're like, oh, what? And then, you know, pretty much I started speaking and I did manage to get interview eventually. So I guess, you know, here's like advice, you know, if you feel that that was the case, don't despair, reach out, get a feedback, you know.
Absolutely.
Nothing bad can happen from you being proactive. And, you know, whether it's a matter of reaching out on LinkedIn or finding an email, you know, because sometimes such hiccups happen, and it's pretty much, you know, still in our control to get on the bottom of it. So yeah.
I'm very against all the AI stuff, so just try to find a human however you can and speak to them about it.
Yeah, I guess, you know, there's still some tweaking that needs to be done, I guess, with some of the tools that I used. All right, so there's a question from Trey on the soft skills. So when it comes to people who are switching roles, you know, or making transversal moves, so what is the sort of top soft skill that hiring managers value the most?
Yeah. So I have quite a personal connection to this question because my mum was a primary school teacher for like 25 years, and she decided that she hated it after 25 years and wanted to try something else. And so I was able to get her a job as a data analyst on a graduate job at 54 or something crazy. So, and I remember what they looked for most was someone who was able to be quite communicative. So being able to speak to people and just showing a willingness to learn. So I know I mentioned it earlier, but just being able to articulate maybe when you got some feedback on something you weren't doing well, and then you took yourself away and then worked on a way to improve the skill that you were given feedback on, and you were open to it and not hesitant or angry at the feedback. I think as long as you show that you're willing to put effort in to improve, then all the other soft skills, obviously be polite, be friendly, and have good communication skills. Sometimes, not all tech jobs need good communication skills, but the willingness to learn and improve is definitely the most important.
No, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. So I guess very quickly on the last question. I mean, there is much more, so massive apologies to everyone whose questions we didn't manage to get to. But just a very quick question from Selena. So she's asking about the summary section. So for example, on LinkedIn. So what's the value of that? And do you, in your view, in your experience, is this the first place where people sort of look at to get the feel of the person? And any tips on how to write a good one?
Yeah, so I like to read them because I like to learn about people. I don't know how many people like sit down and study it. I think the headline and then the skills with any skill badges at the bottom are probably more important. I say the summary is just a nice place for you to be able to put all the keywords that someone on the recruiter, because you know how there's LinkedIn Premium, there's a thing called LinkedIn Recruiter, and it's a whole different front end where you go in and to search for people who are either open to work or not, and you use keywords and location. And so those keywords pick up not just your skills, but your whole entire profile. So whether it's your job summary or your normal summary. And so that's why that summary is really important, is so that we can find you on the recruiter side of things. So I can't remember what the rest of the question was. Yeah, the long sentences or bullet points doesn't really matter. You can put bullet points in there if you want. And a recruiter, uses that. Sometimes reads it, but more importantly, probably it's searched on the back end on the LinkedIn Recruiter.
Okay, that's very good to know. So again, when it comes to those keywords, right? So let's say you're are targeting a particular job or position, or you're learning skills in some sort of area, it's good to caption those, right? Because it would pick up on the summary profile. Okay, that's good to know, actually. And I never thought of it this way. Because many years ago, I also used to have my LinkedIn super basic. I didn't add any bullet points, explanations, summaries. And then I think around 5 years ago, I really beefed it up because I was looking for new opportunities. And then suddenly I got all the recruiters reaching out to me and interviews. And it's just really sort of, became very real for me. And I guess that sort of is the advice worth giving, that, recruiters are one of the best ways of getting a job, right? Especially, let's say, in the beginning of your career when you don't have many opportunities for referral, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
So recruiters can really be your champions from that perspective, and you just need to be visible to them, right? So, and here comes the LinkedIn with all the smart tools that obviously you guys are using. So that's good to know, because I mean, we wouldn't know otherwise how you guys are finding and reaching out to us, and it's not only even for job, right? It's also about just learning opportunities and invitations to really cool events or webinars, or sometimes recruiters, like for me personally, they send me interesting reports of
Mm-hmm.
industry, which I find extremely valuable for me. So it's really much more than just jobs as well, which is really amazing, and I feel like we don't talk enough about it. So yeah,
anything weird and wonderful, I'm always happy to help, no matter what it is. So
yeah. Excellent. Well, I'm conscious of time, and apologies for running over. This has been an absolutely incredible session, Katelin, when we have still so many questions. But please, guys, share those questions or any other questions that you have on our Slack Career Club channel, and I'll pass them on to Katelin, and hopefully she will get back to us maybe with some additional insights. But Katelin, thank you so much for finding time to join us. I feel like we need a follow-up because there's so much to discuss, and this has been incredible, and this is one of the most attended sessions that I think we had, so it's clearly something that is on people's mind to learn more. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you, everyone. I will close the call now.